So we'll go ahead and get started. Thank you all for joining us. I'm Tanya. I am on the MCB board, and this is our monthly Lunch and Learn. We are excited to have some guests with us today. They're going to be talking about scholarship opportunities. We have Stacey Helfery, who's the Administrative Director with the Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri, and Andrew McCrea, who is farmer ranger and a nationally syndicated radio broadcaster and a popular speaker, and he is also on the board for Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri. They're going to talk with us about some scholarships and some things that might be things you can do in your community. So I am going to go ahead and I believe Andrew was going to go first. So Andrew, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Yep. Thank you. No, glad to be with you. And, I'm going to start with more of a broad overview, just looking at scholarships and some things to keep in mind, whether you already have existing scholarships or ones that you're thinking about establishing. And then Stacey's going to talk specifically about some things through Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri. And while it's specific to the Community Foundation, I think it's something that other community foundations probably in the state can assist with as well, but you'll get the take on what we do at Northwest Missouri. So I'm going to share my screen here and we're going to see if this works. I'll have some slides. Let's see. Get it shared. All right, do we have one big screen there now? All right, I see a thumbs up. So it should be our title slide here. So I'll start by saying this. I think all of us, of course, are familiar with scholarships. We probably got some once upon a time, and maybe we're part of giving some. I served 3 terms on the local school board, and when I was a school board member, it really helped me begin to think about, wow, we have such a great resource here. And many times we don't think that much about it because scholarship funds are, in a sense, they've always been around, and we're always giving those at graduations and different things. But at King City, one thing that we had happen is that we had a very large scholarship fund. It was over $500,000. But the way it had been designed was that it would eventually run out. It would go to zero. And that troubled me because I thought, wow, what a great resource. And if we began to look at what we could do with that, we could, in a sense, make it hopefully last in perpetuity and still benefit a lot of students. So that got me to thinking about this. And then my role on the Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri, who back at that time when I was just a new school board member was really getting involved in this as well. And that's going back over a decade now. So, I would ask a couple of questions to begin with for us to think about. And one of those is, are we fostering the prudent financial growth of the funds? So let's say we already have those, we're associated with groups that have them, or we're all parts of different school districts. And, I would encourage school boards, and many of them already thought about this, to really think about that. And secondly, do we have a long-term plan for funding graduates' needs? And we'll get into that more in just a second, but I think there's some really great things that some communities are doing when they begin to think about these two questions. And oftentimes, these things kind of set on autopilot, as you can see down there below. And, it's not that it's necessarily bad, but yet we aren't getting the full use and the full good out of what we could be doing and what more potential there is there. So let's talk first about beginning a scholarship fund. So perhaps, you're listening to this now or watching this later and you're thinking, that's something me or my family or an organization would like to do. That's wonderful. Great. I would encourage you to think through some questions. First of all, what are the needs in your community? Many times we think about setting up a general scholarship fund, nothing wrong with that. But specifically, if you're thinking about a smaller community, a rural community, sometimes we have specific needs. And that leads me to the second question is could you help finish an education? In other words, you may be familiar with scholarships that perhaps help bring a veterinarian back to town or a doctor or teachers back to town. You may want to think about, okay, there are a lot of scholarships that help students get to college, but perhaps your community needs something to help bring them back home from college. Not that you want to put them in handcuffs so that they can't leave, but you also want to think about what are the needs. And so there are several stories I'm familiar with in which communities have done that. Specifically, I think from the rural and ag side, because I am a farmer, knowing some communities that have worked hard to bring veterinarians back to town, large vet practices. And so there may be scholarship funds directly linked to that. Are you going to add to the balance over time? So many times scholarship funds are established and then we never think about adding to them. But there's a wonderful way that you can continue to add to them and share the story about those so they continue to grow. Along with that, will this fund last in perpetuity? Important to think about. I mean, if you want it to go to zero, you can, but having something I think that lasts is important. Considering all types of education, I think is extremely important these days. Certainly lots of scholarships to four-year colleges, but two-year trade schools, even certificate programs are very important for all of our communities. And then finally, I would encourage you to consider flexibility as times change. I was aware of a scholarship fund here recently through one of the boards that I serve on, in which the folks that had set it up, wonderful people, but had set it up probably 25 years ago. And it was amazing to me how much times had already changed in 25 years. And it was becoming very hard for the person administering that to be able to meet that funder's needs because they had set some very specific parameters. And so they were going to probably have to go to court to get some type of change to that. And it would work out eventually. But thinking about, okay, times will change. And so how could I be flexible? And how could I make this so that perhaps others can use it over time? Or let's say that we get to an era in which we have more funding for college. And so you want it to be directed more to trade schools or bringing students back. Having some flexibility can be important. What about existing scholarship funds? Again, I have this, will you add to the balance over time? I think Stacey will talk to this. The scholarships that Community Foundation oversees, and I think a lot of community foundations give the ability to do that and do that very easily online. And I like that feature. Again, will this last in perpetuity? Are you getting a good return on your investment? We'll talk more about it in just a second. And should guidelines be reconsidered? So if you already have an existing one, should you reconsider those? And that was something I know on our board at King City, one of those large scholarship funds, we did look at that. And sometimes you cannot. So sometimes those are set in stone, but sometimes the family that set it up may still be there, or maybe they gave you flexibility. And looking at the terms of that scholarship can be very helpful as far as, should we give lesser money to more kids or more money to just a fewer kids? Looking at those can be very important. So let's talk about fostering prudent financial growth. And I just put down here, consider a school with $500,000 scholarship money. I'm using a school in this example. It could be a private scholarship fund. You can fill in the blank however you want to. But let's say 1.5% earnings on $500,000 over 10 years creates a balance. You can see of $580,000. That's if no money was paid out. And of course, many times you will be paying out money. But for purposes of example, this is if no money was paid out. You can see the difference then between 5% earnings and 7.5% earnings. And note at the very bottom of this slide that the total annualized return for the S&P 500 index over the past 90 years is 9.8%. It may be down a tick or two based on the last month or two, but still, we're talking about the ultimate long-term investment. I always tell people, we think about investing for the long term. Well, most of these scholarships are set up to last beyond our lifetimes. So if the stock market goes to zero, we'll have more trouble than the scholarship money running out. We'll have the chaos in the nation of the world. So I like to look at it as, let's think about how you could get a good return from this. Now, Stacey will talk about that from the standpoint of the Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri and perhaps other community foundations here in the state. But this is also a conversation to have with your local bank or however these funds may be invested. And in some cases, those local financial institutions can help you do this. In some cases, they may not be set up as well to do this. And that's no knock against them. I happen to serve on a bank board. And so I would say, sometimes we can do very well and sometimes there'll be other avenues, and that doesn't make one necessarily bad or good. It's just what works best at that time. But do think about this, because if you have that money invested in let's say CDs, as opposed to some other route. And this is why in our local school, we chose to invest most of our scholarships with the blessing of those that established them through, for us, Community Foundation of Northwest Missouri, which serves our region. And immediately our earnings jumped from the 1.5% range to probably the 5 or 7% or more. And that's a huge difference. I mean, you can see the amount of money there. We're talking about $500,000 over the course of 10 years with how that's invested. And so that's a really, really important conversation to have. Many times it's school boards that need to have that conversation, or scholarship committee within a county or a school district, but it could be for a private fund that maybe you've established or your organization has established. So let's then talk about some planning with this, because we often have these scholarship funds within a community or an area, but sometimes we haven't really thought about, okay, how could we do this to support even more? And, you know, there are what we call promise programs. You may have heard about them in some cities where, you know, maybe a certain number of students or all students receive college paid for or half their college paid for. And we may think, well, that requires a huge donor, or it takes lots of money, or it takes intensive management. Maybe, but I'm here to show you that it doesn't necessarily. And we've done some interviews for this through my broadcast work to say that, you know, this is more realistic than a lot of people think. So El Dorado, Arkansas, you can see a town of 18,000, which, you know, depending on where you and I live, may seem large or may seem small. But El Dorado now has a program in which all of their high school graduates can receive full college tuition paid for 4 years. They pay the maximum rate of a in-state college in Arkansas. Now, they don't have to go to school in Arkansas, but that's the max they can receive. This was helped in part by a major grant with one of the major employers there. So it's easy to say, oh, well, we don't have that person willing to step up and do that. Maybe, but you may have more resources than you think. A good example is Arkadelphia, Arkansas, which isn't too far from El Dorado. And Arkadelphia now gives a half scholarship to all their students. And it's a sliding scale. So you have to have gone, I believe, all 13 years or close to it to get the 100%. And then it slides depending on how long you've been there. And to get any money, you have to have been there for all 4 years of high school, I believe. And there's a few other requirements. So if you talk to the towns that have done something like this, Arkadelphia is one I'm familiar with because I've interviewed those folks before. You know, you say, okay, what difference does that make in your town? And sometimes it's hard to put exact figures on it, but they will say, you know, this is a conversation that parents now have. Should we stay in this town? Because there is a huge benefit to us staying here and maybe commuting somewhere else for work or establishing a business here. El Dorado, Arkansas will tell you that they certainly have seen a difference in businesses being established, people staying, and the overall test scores within their school, because this is now a draw. This is one of the things that our community can add to the list of reasons why it's good for your family to live here, because we can bring you this. So let's walk through some math here. It is possible. It takes some planning, but it is possible. So let's say that you have $1 million scholarship balance in a school district, in a county, wherever it may be. Maybe you have less, maybe you have more, but I find even in very rural districts, many times they will approach $1 million or more when you count all the scholarships out there. 5% interest or 5% earnings, maybe is the better way to say this, equals $50,000 per year. And if you had 50 students getting further education every 4 years, that would equate to $1,000 per year for every student every year to further their education. So this may be working off something that's already there and available in a county or within a school. If we began to talk about this and pool our resources and began to do a little planning. So the question I throw out to communities then is, okay, what would that mean to your town or your school district to say, you know, every student that comes here, we're going to guarantee them $1,000 every year to go to a trade school or a four-year institution. Is that enough to draw people or help them to stay or to make great things happen in your community? You know, I can't put a number on that, but I know it certainly doesn't hurt. It's something that makes a difference. And if you continue to add to this and businesses think about doing more of this, that number can continue to increase. And if it's invested wisely, notice that's 5% earnings. But I showed you on that slide before, annualized return from the S&P 500 to be more than that. So there is the ability to truly do some great things with this. So there are a lot of figures on this slide, but I call it math and match, the power of matching gifts. And I'm a big believer in this just because I've seen it work so many times. But, you know, what if you had 10 businesses or 10 individuals or a combination of 25 or 50, we'll put in quotes, donors, and they pledged that much money over 5 years. So 25 donors or businesses pledging $1,000 over 5 years to go to a scholarship fund. And let's say it was a matching fund. So 25 at 1,000 for 5 years is 125, but you throw that out to the community and say, will you match it dollar for dollar? That's $250,000 you would raise in 5 years for scholarships in your community. And this can work for endowments and so forth as well. And I know I've talked about those before. But this is why I say that having a conversation within a community, within a school district, within an organization is important, because having the conversation and making a plan can make a big, big difference. And then taking those monies, and if we're going to add to it, and in this case, maybe throw it out as a match, can really have a giant impact relatively quickly. And even if you don't hit the full number, you've hit a number, which is better than zero. So you're making a big difference pretty quickly with these scholarship funds and these dollars. So what steps should you take? Well, Stacey's up next here, and she's going to talk specifically about Community Foundation in Northwest Missouri and some things that we try to do to help foster this. And certainly there are different ways that you can do that, but she'll talk about what we tend to do. But the community foundations in the state can often increase the rate of return on existing scholarships. They can help foster local giving. I think Stacey will talk about that. And in fact, I find in our own school district, it's more that we just don't think about it. You can go online right now and give to any of the scholarship funds at King City School District. We just need to make people more aware of that. It's very easy to do. And so having the ability to give to those very easily and can increase their balance is important. Helping connect students with regional scholarship opportunities is important. Again, Stacey will talk more about this. Working with school districts to develop a plan to do more for future graduates and build a plan that builds the local community. So I know that in my portion here, I've tended to talk quite a bit about school districts. And so even if you aren't on a school board, this is something important to do. Several school districts I know have either placed all or part of their monies with a community foundation or an organization to help them be able to do this. And that should, in my mind, go along with a larger conversation of, okay, do we have a plan? So it's one thing to invest wisely, and it's another step then to think about how do we make this money do a lot for our students and do a lot for our community. And that gets down to the conversation then of, okay, is this for first year students? Is this for any year student? Is this to bring students back for specific jobs or specific careers? Will we have a sliding scale? And perhaps there are other organizations within your community that have scholarships, and maybe it's getting together with those organizations and families and saying, what could we do if we all work together? We still have our own scholarships, and perhaps we'll still continue to identify who we'll give to, but could we pool some of our knowledge and our brain power to say, we're going to do this as a large group to still make something even bigger happen? So I'll be, of course, taking questions here, but I'm going to stop sharing my screen and let Stacey then be able to talk about some specific things that the Community Foundation in Northwest Missouri has done in our region that I think has worked very well.
Thank you, Andrew. Can you all see the Scholar link?
Yes.
Well, the Community Foundation, we serve the 18 counties of Northwest Missouri. So a lot of our scholarships are, within those counties, although we will serve counties outside of our service area. So, we have scholarships down toward Kansas City and things. So we're not just limited to our 18 counties. We are currently administering about 98 scholarships. And like I said, that's all over Northwest Missouri, and they all have their own criteria. And so that is kind of the beauty of setting up a scholarship with a community foundation is, the donor or, it may be an organization, it may be an individual, it may be a school district that, they're able to set that scholarship up and set any criteria that they would like to it. So, it's our job to make sure that, that criteria is met. So we do this through a program that we call Scholar Link. And ScholarLink basically centralizes all of the scholarships in Northwest Missouri. Every year, we're always adding new ones. What it does is it creates one scholarship application for the students. So there's no more paper applications. So they do not have to, complete multiple applications that may have the same questions, may have the same essay, multiple times. They go online and they complete or answer some qualifying questions and do one application for that. After they answer those qualifying questions, then the database matches them to the scholarships that they're eligible for. So it's a great way to help these kids find scholarships that otherwise they may not be aware of. And then those candidates are given to the scholarship committees for each review. And so we developed this program so that we could ease the burden of filling out multiple applications for the kids. And as I said before, help the students find scholarship opportunities because, a lot of times we do here and out in the more rural areas, they don't know where to look or where to go to find them. So this kind of puts it all in, it's kind of a one-stop shop type of thing. And this also allows us to help our donors by creating a larger pool of candidates for them to be able to review and make their selections from. And then the most important part of it for us is that it diversifies the recipients so that we have more kids receiving scholarships. As we were beginning the research on this program, we started talking to a lot of school counselors and finding out that, it's a lot of kids are receiving so much money that they're buying cars with their scholarship money. So our goal was to try to spread the wealth a little more and allow for more kids to get those scholarships and not just your top kids. And we seem to have a lot of donors now that come to us to set up scholarships that they don't want the top kids. They're wanting kind of that middle income kid that, parents, don't make enough for them to pay for it, but yet they're not getting all of the financial aid that maybe the lower income kids are getting. So we found that kind of that middle class is where the need tends to be the most. So the benefits of the program is that it's an easy way for donors to create a legacy or to memorialize a loved one or even honor someone. We have several scholarships that were set up to honor an individual. It eases the burden on school districts. So, a lot of the school districts, their bookkeeper is having to track all the scholarships, send out all the checks, every fall to the schools, keep track of the kids. The counselors are trying to track the kids down, get them to apply. And so, we're kind of taking some of that work off of their plate so that they can focus on other things. The same goes with trust departments. A lot of your trust departments are administering scholarships, but that's really not what they're designed to do. So we have contracted with a couple of the local trust departments here in St. Joe to administer some of their scholarships for them so that their staff can focus more on other types of trusts. And so it's a great benefit for them as well. And just really to help students further their education, of course, is our primary goal and provide more opportunities there for them. So the Community Foundation takes care of all the administration. So we work with training and educating high school counselors on our program, how to use it. Our scholarship coordinator goes out every fall and visits with all the counselors to help them understand how the program works and what to do so that they can help their kids. And then we're fielding questions from students, parents, counselors, trust officers, helping them through the application process. They forget their passwords a lot, the kids do. So, talking to them a lot, getting them back in the system. So, and then we provide a lot of status reports to the counselors and the trust officers. And again, we would do this if it were an organization that had set up they may call and say, how many applicants do we have right now? We're happy to share that information. If it were like a community that had set up a scholarship or, a corporation or something. We do provide online access for the selection committees to review those applications. And then we notify those recipients by letter, and then we send out their awards in the late summer, early fall. And so we take care of all of the administration of that. So if you have a group that sets up a scholarship fund, we hear that a lot. Well, what do we have to do because we don't have time to do this, or we're just volunteers. The community foundation can handle all of that. And the only thing that they have to do is just review the applications and make the selections. And we have some that don't even want to do that. And so we can do that for them as well. So that's one of the benefits of having a scholarship through a community foundation, is we can handle that for you. When a scholarship is set up, as Andrew said, they can choose whether they want that to be endowed or not endowed. If it's not endowed, then they can grant the principal of the scholarship. The scholarship may not last very many years if it's managed that way, but that's okay. If it's endowed, then the way the community foundation does the spending policy is we take the last 3 years ending fund balances and take an average of that. Then we take 5% of that average, and that's how much they have available to grant each year. And so that's how we calculate that. And by doing that, that allows that scholarship to last into perpetuity. And so that's a lot of donors like that, because their intent is they're trying to create a legacy, and they want that to go on forever. If in the event markets have been bad and the earnings aren't high enough to award the scholarship, then for that year it's generally not given, and the hope is that the next year there's enough to give it. And so that's how we try to make sure we maintain those scholarships into perpetuity. So a lot of school districts like to use us for scholarship administration because they have the money invested in CDs, so they're not earning anything. So they'll move the scholarships to us so that they can use our investment pools, and it allows them to earn, in most cases, double or triple what they're getting in a CD. And then in the end, that just gives them more money to be able to award in scholarships. So that's why school districts like to use us. Corporations could use us as well. They could set up scholarships for their employees' children. We could take care of the administration and management of that so that someone on their staff doesn't have to do that. So that's also another option in communities. If you have, businesses or larger corporations, they could use our services to offer that scholarship as well. It kind of helps them meet their social responsibility as well. So I had a link for a demo of the program. I don't know if you guys wanted to see that or not. And I'm happy to show it. Or Andrew, what do you think? Time-wise?
Yeah, just go ahead and show it there. I think so.
Yeah, go ahead.
Let's see if this. Oh, it's not going to connect. Okay, let's try it this way. Okay, can you guys see our website there?
Yes.
So from our homepage, we just have the scholar link, apply for scholarships. They click that. And it just gives them a few instructions on if they're a first-time user or if they're returning. There's instructions on how to apply. If they go to the qualifying questions, these are the questions that they would answer that ties them to, makes them eligible for the scholarships that we offer. And so you can see their, what county, if they're a graduating senior. The majority of our scholarships are for graduating seniors, although we do have some that are for that graduate students can apply to. We have some that are, they get it as a graduating senior, but they don't receive the money till their sophomore year. And that's because the donor wants to make sure that they're really going to make it. You know, we all know a lot of times kids go off to college and then they realize this isn't for me. And then, you know, they drop out. Some of our scholarships require them to be majoring in a specific field. Sometimes they change their mind after they get to college and they change their major. So, you know, we allow a lot of flexibility with our donors when they're setting up that criteria, but also how they want to pay out. And so we do have some that we pay out, you know, the second year. And so they answer all these questions. And then once they've answered them, I can't show you because we don't have any scholarships open right now. They open January 15th. But once they would complete these questions, they hit submit, then it'll bring up the list of scholarships that they are eligible for. And then they just click those, click next, and then they'll create an account. Once they create the account in the system, then they begin filling out the application. And then along with that, there's a transcript that they have to upload, reference letters if required, you know, certain essays. And so again, the donor can decide what they want from that student as far as the application goes. And then once they've completed that, they submit, and then it goes into our system. And then when it's time to award, then we work with the selection committees. They go online, they're able to view the applications, they can score them, make comments. Each committee member can see what each other, you know, is scoring, and then they make their selections from there. And then we notify the counselors and the students of receipt of that. So that is all I had. What questions do you have for Andrew and I?
Does anybody have any questions? Oh,
this is Elaine. I was going, you're all in Northwest, and I'm all the way down in, you know, Texas County, down in the southern part of the state. Do you know if Ozark Foundation of the Ozarks has a similar scholar link? Because that sounds like what we give $1 million of scholarships. It'll piecemeal at school. So I guess I'm in their territory or region, but do they have a similar thing like Scholar Link?
They do. They administer a lot more scholarships actually than we do. And I do know they have an online system as well. And Beth, her last name has escaped me, but she is in charge of scholarships down there, and she's fabulous. So if you had questions, I could get you in touch with her.
So this is Bonnie Prigge with Merrimack Regional Planning Commission in St. James. And we serve as an affiliate of the Community Foundation of the Ozarks. So they use Foundant as their platform. That was a transition this past year, but it is amazing that the students can go in, find different scholarships, and then apply online. And being a reviewer as well, I really like the aspect of being able to evaluate the scholarships online, reading them and ranking them. So to the folks down in Texas County Community Foundation, it's great to work with, and I would encourage you to reach out to Beth Hirsch. Yeah,
Thank you.
Beth and I talk a lot here lately. So with some of the transitions and some of the scholarships that are going on. So yeah, it's pretty amazing. We have one school that probably has about close to $1.5 million invested with CFO, where the scholarships goes just to one school because of the effort there. We had a couple of large donors and then a lot of smaller ones. So it's a lot of fun getting together, usually in April, to make those awards. And our goal with that group and setting out was that every graduating senior who wished to go to college would receive some type of scholarship. Right now, we're really working on getting the kids to apply. That's kind of been the struggle of, and we do now have the online application that we hope will really make that easier for them. So great job what you guys are doing in the Northwest. Appreciate hearing about it.
Thank you.
Okay, for an individual school, and I'll use our school district, we have the Alumni Association that would have that amount of money, but they give scholarships. We have the Community Betterment that gives a scholarship, just on our own. But and then there's like 15 other memorial scholarships for anywhere from $250, $500 to $1,000. So if we would take all of those and pool it, and like go to Community Foundation of the Ozarks, and then that would be put there to get that 7.5% that Andrew was talking about a while ago. Is that what I'm hearing?
Well, yes, and I'll answer it from the standpoint of our school district. When I was on the school board, we were similar in that we had several individual scholarships that had been set up by families since before I was even born. But what we did is we went first of all to those families and said, hey, we're thinking about, investing this with the Community Foundation, but we want your blessing before we did that. And most said, yes, we think that's a great thing. But one key thing is, and I know Stacey, would say this about all these schools, is those individual scholarships didn't go away. They still have their individual account, and they're still all part of King City's money that's going out. And some of those already had stipulations on how they had to be distributed, and some were just general. But you don't have to eliminate those lines when you invest it. You can keep those individual names. And if I go on on ScholarLink right now, I could, or on the Community Foundation's website, I could give to any one of those scholarships. Would that be right, Stacey?
Yes. Yeah. Each standalone scholarship remains a standalone scholarship, more or less. So a good example, one of the school district here in town, part of the reason they moved their scholarships over to us was they wanted it off of their books. They wanted the money off their 990 because people look at that and say, well, look how much money you've got. You've got all this money. What do you need this for? So they wanted all that off their books, and we moved over, I think, 30 separate scholarships at that time, and they all remained 30 separate scholarships. So you don't have to combine it all into one.
The conversation that I wish we would have done, and it wasn't because somebody was upset or we just didn't think about it at the time, is it would have been good if we could have brought in representatives from those different scholarships of those families, if they, are still around, and say, hey, can we think about, do we want to change any of the rules around this? We're going to kind of move these together. Could we, do anything like that? And secondly, and this is the thing that, again, we're missing out on a big opportunity, and I didn't think about it when I was on the school board, is we should be publicizing that, hey, not only do these scholarships exist, but you can give to them. And it's very easy to give to them. And boy, getting that out, especially, I talk about it all the time with endowments. People who graduated from your school or lived in your community who live states away are in some cases much more likely to give than your local people, because they went somewhere, they did something, and maybe they were successful, and they feel like, I really should give back to my hometown. And making that easy for them and say, hey, all of our scholarships, or a lot of them, are online. Go to this page, click, give. I think you could get even more very easily.
One of the other things we've done, not just for scholarships, but just in general, is worked with the funeral homes. And I know this is kind of morbid, but worked with them to say, use us as an option for giving if the family, a lot of times in lieu of flowers, they'll ask for donations. Sometimes they don't know where to choose. And so one of the things we have talked about is having just a memorial fund where memorials could come in, and then when the family is ready, they could decide this is where we want the money to go, and then we would grant that money back out to whatever nonprofit organization they wanted to support. And so that's another great way to increase scholarship funds, would be working with funeral homes.
I would sure echo that. Talk to local funeral homes and have these discussions with them, because a family in a time of loss, having somebody that knows a little about that, and they don't have to make all those decisions right then, but they can help guide them and be able to, do wonderful things, and helping them have a little bit of that knowledge can be great. I know Maysville's a great example of that. They had a memorial here recently, and that's going toward their local endowment. And that's how they decided. But again, it was a funeral home director who stepped forward and helped make that happen. So
I have a question. So do you have to have a minimum amount to start a scholarship fund?
Some community foundations do have minimums. We do not. The only thing we require when you set up a scholarship is the first year's administrative fee, which is typically $350 up front.
Okay. All right. And then, so I think you kind of touched a little bit on this, but I kind of wanted to circle back around because like sometimes non-traditional scholarships, like maybe can someone set up a scholarship, like maybe if there's somebody like a single mom that wants to go to college now, or do you see some of those, and can you do something like that?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah, we could do something like that. It could have a requirement that they have to be a non-traditional student. That's easy for them to verify. We can verify that with the school. So.
Okay. Are there any other questions?
one thing I'll share very quickly, several of you on this call I know, and so I appreciate you being here. And I'm always willing to visit with somebody, or I find because of my background with the school board, I'm asked sometimes to talk with some schools, or I know I have a presentation 2 weeks for Nebraska School Boards Association, and part of the discussion will be this. It's very easy for me to Zoom, and Stacey's great to talk about how it actually will work with, if it's the community foundation, you know, if they happen to be more in the northwestern part of the state. But if you know a school board or school district, or really anybody for that matter, I'm always happy to do, you know, the quick, their meetings are tight. They've got lots of time. I've been there, but it's easy to do a 5 or 10 minute Zoom in a school board meeting and just talk through this. And Stacey, you have several school districts in Northwest Missouri that would have either all or part of their money with Community Foundation, right?
Yes, we do.
And I'm sure the Ozarks would be the same. And between the two of us, I think we cover a lot of the state. There are other community foundations in the state, but I think several school districts have done something like this.
Thank you, Andrew. That's great information. So before we get to close out, do both of you care, how does somebody want to have some questions they need answered directly from you guys? Is there a good way to get a hold of you? And do you care to drop it in the comments box so they could maybe copy an email from you guys?
Yep, I'll just put my email in here. That's probably the easiest way to get in touch with me.
My family has a scholarship through West Plains, Missouri State University. And I know we donate to that, but I don't think that fund ever grows except when we put things in that. And if I had that scholarship with the foundation, it looks like that could grow on its own. Am I on the right track? Or
Yes.
I sure think so.
Elaine, you're in Texas County?
Texas County.
Okay, so with Community Foundation of the Ozarks, they return 4% of the basically the principal in scholarships each year. The fund, kind of like Northwest, typically 7.5% to 8% is its net gain. So the scholarships do grow. So we see that pool of funds, the principal, basically what stays in there growing, which creates a larger return each year. Most years, I don't, there's been a few times, I think, every now and then you hit a bad spot, but for the most part, our funds are growing.
It looks like I'm having, when we donate 500 or we have a $500 scholarship, it's just the money we put in there. It's never any growth like you would put in. I'm thinking you got the wheels turning in my head. Thank you.
Well, and certainly, Stacey, and I know this would be true for a lot of the community foundations, there are different ways, there are often different choices on how you want to invest in that, very conservatively or aggressively or points in between. So that can make a big difference. But I will tell you, school board can be one of those things where it's sometimes you get beat up being on a school board. But one of the things that I felt best about after 9 years is we would get a report, in this case from Community Foundation, every 3 months or so, and seeing that large scholarship fund that had been projected to go to zero in 30 or 40 years, to see that thing not only stabilize but grow. And they were giving scholarships out of that, and part of that was market growth at that time, but that thing was growing, and that just made me feel so good, because that would have gone to zero. And now I mean, it would be public knowledge through school board members. But I think it's over $750,000, and that's such a great story. And that was a person who donated that money, and they never knew that they had that kind of money, and voila, they died, and there it was to the school. And so, each one of us in the city have to be stewards of hopefully in our community to help make that happen. So that was cool seeing that happen. And I think community foundations and other groups can make that happen. So.
Well, and just one last point too, as if you're setting up a scholarship, or a community is setting up a scholarship, all donations to them through a community foundation are tax deductible. So they do get a receipt, or what we call an acknowledgement letter, for their donation to use on their taxes. So that sometimes is a great incentive to get people to donate to them.
Right. Does anybody else have any questions or any comments? Okay, if not, we are getting closer to the top of the hour. So I do want to just put a reminder that Andrew and Stacey's contact information is in the comments, and I have that. So if you do need it, just let us know and we can get that sent back out. I do want to thank Andrew and Stacey for joining us and sharing this information. It's very informative, and maybe something to think about doing in your community as well. Stacey, just real quick off the top of your head, do you know kind of where that boundary is for your guys' foundation, the counties that you guys cover?
Sure. We go over to the Kansas border, we stop at the Iowa border, and we go over on the east side to include the counties of Putnam, Andrew, Putnam, Sullivan, and Worth.
And Lynn.
Lynn, yeah.
Okay. And that's, you said what, 18 counties? Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
And certainly any of these community foundations can work outside of those regions. They tend to work more with those because that's, they're closer to those people. But yeah, if you lived in an adjoining area, that would go for any of them. Get in touch with them. They can help set it up. Or like Stacey mentioned, she knows the folks in different places. And if it works better for you someplace a little more local, that's great too. So.
Okay, I'm going to throw a question out here because I know what area I'm in. I'm in Community Foundation in the Ozarks area, and I know they go up quite a ways. But is there a place, if somebody doesn't know what the foundation is for their area, is there a place that they can go to find that information?
Yes, we actually have the Missouri Alliance of Community Foundations, and we have a website that they can go to. And I believe that website is allmo.org.
Okay.
I'll look that up. Yes.
Allmo.org.
Yeah, allmo.org.
Okay. All right. So then they can just go there and find out what Community Foundation covers their area.
Yes.
All right. All right. Well, I appreciate both of your time today, and everybody that joined us. We greatly appreciate it. We are recording this, and so we'll have it available. We are working on getting, we've got a YouTube channel set up for us, so we'll be able to share our videos that way. So just bear with us. We're having to upload these, and so that does take a little bit of time because they are hour-long videos. So we will get that set up where we can actually start having those links shared. So follow our Facebook page because we'll get those, and then once we get them set up, we'll also put it in the newsletter. Just follow our Facebook page, and we'll be posting that information as soon as we get all of them loaded. I do want to thank you all for joining us. We will have another Lunch and Learn October 19th at noon. We are still working on our speaker, but we'll get that sent out to you guys as soon as possible. But thank you all for joining us. And if you have any questions about Missouri Community Betterment, feel free to reach out to one of the board members, and we'll be able to help you as best we can. Thank you all for joining us, and you guys have a great rest of your day. Bye.
Thanks you.